Welcome, everybody. It is 10:51 a.m. Today is Friday, August 25th, and we are having a work session with our HR director on equal employment opportunity overview for the municipality of Anchorage. So we'll start with introductions.
George Martinez.
Karen Bronga.
Scott Myers.
Meg Zalato.
Christopher Constant on the phone. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Rivera. Anyone else on the phone? Hearing none, we'll go around.
Ron Kamahele, Human Resources.
Tyler Andrews, HR Director.
So when you hit the mic, the green light's got to go on, but there, perfect.
Junior Allen, Chief Equity Officer.
Welcome, everybody. So what we decided to do, Mr. Andrews and I met last week and had a pretty far-ranging discussion on a number of topics. And one of the topics that came up was our annual equal opportunity employer review and the process that the municipality goes through. We have a quarterly update and annual plan. And so rather than diving deep into the details of the quarterly report or the annual plan, what we decided to do, because we have quite a busy day today, is just do our first introduction from the team at the administration side on the equal employment opportunity process. So this is a kind of a higher level conversation that will be followed on with another meeting that will be more specific in details about what we're doing and how we're doing it. So for the purposes of today, this is an introduction. So you have the floor, Mr. Andrews.
Through the chair, thank you very much for inviting us. I think this two-part thing is going to work really well. We can do an introduction of the basic concept of affirmative action planning, which is our primary tool for getting to equal employment opportunity. I'm really thankful to have Ron Kamahele on my staff. He's done a great job of making sure that our plans are well maintained, up to date. He is a very unique human resource professional in that he likes math, which is not something that is common to the HR DNA. And I'm very happy to have Junior Amabe here because Junior provides a lot of reinforcement and community outreach, which helps us do a better job at reaching out to people and letting them know that we want them to be a part of the municipal employment relationship where they want to, of course. So that's a big deal. We'll learn more about that in the second session. So the first part we're going to do here is just do an overview of affirmative action planning and programming. Some of you may have worked for employers that did this. Some of you may have not. Maybe your job didn't put you in contact with this kind of activity. So I appreciate the opportunity. We're going to do an overview of what it is, where it comes from, and then, as the chair said, we'll do a more detailed statistical presentation, similar to what Ron did with you all. I believe it was that March or April? In April earlier this year. We will do that again, and then Ron will cover this, but I'll just mention it briefly. So what we're doing here is we're going to do this overview. Then the next presentation will be on our progress to date on this year's plan. Then you will see us again in the first quarter as we present the newly updated plan for 2024. And there we will discuss any placement goals or activities that we need to be doing. With the goal always of making sure that we make the effort to see our workforce reflect our community, right? That's the underlying theme of all this activity. So I'll turn it over to Ron. We really welcome your questions. We see questions as the opportunity for folks to learn and understand what we're about, and it'll improve our activity. One other thing I want to mention just really briefly, we've added road shows with the major departments, and Junior and Ron and my recruitment staff are all participating in that. So we're going directly to places like AFD, APD. We haven't gotten them all yet. We just started this activity. But to let them know what they look like and what, if they've got a placement goal, what's that look like? And if they've got some strengths, what do those look like? I think that's a very important conversation to have, because if they don't know, then they're not going to work on it, right? You can't do anything about stuff you don't know about. So we've added that feature to our activity with the departments. And if there are any questions for me, I would have one other thing. When we do our next presentation, will be also an opportunity to, Ron will present a little bit of additional data that can also help us have a conversation about recruitment and staffing, right? So, because these are all very closely related. So if there are any questions for me right now, I'm going to turn over to Ron. Okay, thank you.
Good morning. My name's Ron Kamahaley again. I work in human resources. I'm the director of organizational development. But one of the key features that I've been working on since I've been here is affirmative action planning. I came to the Muni in 2019. I had just come from the university where I worked there for about 19 years. And I got a grounding in affirmative action planning there while working at the university. So I brought that here. And so I've been developing the municipality's affirmative action plans since that time. So what I want to do here today is really give an overview of, affirmative action, and the real purpose of affirmative action is that top line on the slide, we're trying to achieve equal employment opportunity within our community. So next slide, please. Great. So it goes all the way back to 1964 when the Civil Rights Act was first signed by President Johnson. And shortly thereafter, he created Executive Order 11246 in 1965. And that's where you first see the words affirmative action. And so, and also, the executive order prohibits discrimination based upon race, color, religion, sex, or sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, and so forth. So between the Civil Rights Act and the executive order, all the principles there were codified. So next slide, please. So they were codified in the Code of Federal Regulation under Title 41, which is public contracts. And that has often caused a lot of confusion in the public. What does this have to do with public contracts? Well, the wording of the executive order talks about contractors, that is contractors with the federal government, are prohibited from discrimination and need to take affirmative steps in promoting diversity. So contractor is a very broad term. It generally essentially means anyone who receives money from the federal government. And so local governments that receive funds are a contractor. Although local governments are technically are exempt from maintaining a written plan, our municipal code does require that the HR department actually prepare a plan and update it periodically. So that's how we got to our plans. Any questions there yet?
Not seeing any yet.
All right, next slide, please. So I've taken a little excerpt from Title 41, Section 60-2, which talks about the general purpose of affirmative action. And I bring this out as an exact quote because it really does help frame everything that that's going to follow. So, affirmative action program is a management tool. And it's designed to ensure equal employment opportunity. And this next piece is, I find it's very important, that absent discrimination in your selection and hiring process, and over time, an organization's workforce will reflect generally the racial and gender and ethnic profile of the labor pools. I'll get to that in a moment. But it's the idea that we first have to understand, where we stand, and that given time and fair processes, we will reflect our general community with respect to the labor pools. So we continuously strive to develop a workforce that does just that. Next slide, please. It's important to note that affirmative action isn't just one thing. It's actually four things. We have four plans, four separate plans. There's a plan for women and minorities. There's a plan for individuals who experience disabilities. We also have a plan for veterans. And there is also under public transportation, they have a separate affirmative action programming requirement from the Federal Transportation Administration. And so we develop and maintain all four of those plans. Next slide. So when we're talking about these plans and programs, they all contain these three general components in the plan. First, there is a diagnostic component, which involves quantitative analyses of various types. So we can mathematically establish where there is underutilization and where we need to focus our attention. And we use statistical methods to determine that. Also, action-oriented program with each plan, the steps that we will take to address those areas where we have underutilization and we want to improve, and steps we're going to take if we identify any problem areas or areas of concern. So active steps. Also, important component of all of these plans is an internal auditing and reporting component. I mean, if you don't report out the information, how are you going to expect people to be able to act on it? That's part of the roadshow that we've initiated this year. Next slide, please. So getting down to sort of the nuts and bolts of a plan. So each plan has a plan year, and the plan year, our plan year, I should say, is starts on January 1 and it runs through December 31. So all of everything that's in the plan, is effective during that plan year. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about these quantitative analyses that we do. First, there's what's called the utilization analysis. And that's where we look at the composition of our workforce on January 1 of the plan year in terms of gender, in terms of disability, in terms of race, ethnicity, and so forth. And then the key part of that analysis is to look at our workforce composition and compare it to what is available in the community. And we use data from the federal government on availability, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a moment, but we get the availability numbers from the federal government. We also do quantitative analyses on the outcomes of various personnel processes. So for example, for hiring, we analyze all of the hires, and we also compare all the hires to all the people who applied to all of our jobs. And Trust me, that's a huge data set. It gets up to about 9,000 lines of data. But we compare the outcomes in terms, for women, minorities, and so forth in the hiring process. We do the same thing for promotions to see about internal promotions as well as separations. And we do this for women, minorities, people experience disabilities. For veterans, we just do just a hiring percentage. So it's a much smaller analysis. And so we go through and we do these types of analyses. And next slide, please. And the results of those analyses actually form the plan for the plan year. So with the utilization analysis, we determine if there's any statistically significant underutilization of a particular category, and we set a goal. And then for the rest of the year, our goal is to try to make progress in those areas. For areas of concern or problem areas, that's where we've determined there's a statistically significant disparity in the outcomes in a particular personnel action. And again, we make note of that. And then during the rest of the year, we monitor, we make adjustments and changes as we may see necessary to remove any barriers to equal employment opportunity. And then there's the reporting. So plans need to be published at the beginning of the year. And so basically in January, I download all the data and I begin my analyses. And then we should have a nice report by February or March, I think we had this year. I also monitor activity during the course of the plan year, and I provide quarterly updates to Chief Equity Officer and the Chief Human Resource Officer. And then there's a midterm report, which shows our progress from January 1 to June 30. So it's a 6-month sort of midterm report card, which I have. And that'll probably be our next meeting. So in addition, I should also say that we've started this roadshow to go around and to share the information more broadly among the departments within municipality. Next slide. So our primary tools in achieving equal employment opportunity are: one, diverse recruiting, getting the word out. Just in general, we actually do a very good job of that. The recruiting platform, applicant tracking platform we have does get extensive hits. And so in that respect, we do a very good job, but that doesn't mean that we can't also do more focused outreach and recruiting efforts. The other main tool, and this may be the most important tool, is that we have fair screening and selection processes that are rational. That is, you have rational decision-making processes that are based upon job-related criteria, and everybody is assessed in the same manner on those job-related criteria. And then the third tool is to dampen unconscious bias, because everyone's got it. You may not know it because it's unconscious, but everyone has it. And so part of our roadshow is to also talk about unconscious bias, how it comes up, how it can be, manifest in decision making, even unconsciously, but raising the awareness that unconscious bias exists in each and every one of us helps people to recognize that. And then, the bias may be unconscious, but if you're aware of it, you can consciously not react to it and have a fuller conversation with your colleagues and other decision makers and making assessments about people's qualities for the job at hand. So that's the last slide.
So I have 3 people with questions. First, Mr. Rivera. Mr. Ray, you have the floor.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I really appreciate this conversation, and I really appreciate these slides and how the easy communication for these slides, because the Municipal Audit Committee has historically been taking a look at these updates of the affirmative action plan as they come out in the report. And, if you ever want to take a look at the recording, as we look at them at the Municipal Audit Committee, these can be pretty technical. And so I really appreciate this laying it down in a very easy to understand way. I guess I just have one question, and maybe this is just I think you answered it, but I just want to clarify it. So I was a little bit surprised when you said that local governments are exempt from developing and maintaining a written affirmative action plan. Because as I understood it, there was a period in time when the municipality was actually, was late in turning in an affirmative action plan that was required. But I'm wondering if that's specific for the FTA, where we were out of compliance with the FTA affirmative action plan, and now we're back into compliance. If you just clarify that for me.
Thank you. I think I can try. In terms of local government in general, I mean, I went to the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, and they said, local government in general is exempt. However, the FTA, they have a whole separate set of rules. And so that's why public transportation has to have a written plan. But of course, our municipal code says that we will have a plan too. So, but yeah, the FTA requirements, they are different, but they're specific to the agency that is actually receiving the funds.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks, Ms. Alto.
Thank you. This last slide, dampen unconscious bias. I'm happy to see that. We've done some specific appropriations to APD for training on implicit bias, and it would be really great to hear from you all as you talk with departments if that kind of support is needed throughout the municipality. Was really thrilled that APD raised that issue with us, and I actually had the opportunity to sit in on that. It was fascinating and really, really good. So I would definitely be interested in making sure that we continue that work throughout the various municipal departments, especially if there's kind of some strategic way to go about doing that.
Mr. Martinez.
Thank you, Chair. First question, is it fair to say that this is just about employment, and in fact that affirmative action programming requirements or values transcend employment and go into other areas of the municipality? Is that fair, that this is a limited scope today?
Through the chair. Yeah, I would say that what we're presenting here today is of a limited scope. The municipality has other municipal code and policies about treating people fairly. I mean, that's why we have different complaint systems like the Ombudsman's office and stuff like that. But today we're focused narrowly on employment.
Okay, and so yeah, but just even sticking within the lane, I mean, the idea of procurement, for example, would fall under WMBE businesses, women and minority-owned businesses, and some of those other categories, right? So we're not only just talking about workforce and recruitment, but that's kind of what the bulk of your presentation was today.
Correct.
I can speak to that. So we have this conversation is in the context of the Affirmative Action Employment Opportunity Report. And so we did not broaden this conversation towards other things. The question asked was specific to employment. So if we as a body want to have a more far-reaching conversation, we should chat offline how, who, and what structure we want to apply to that. So
Great. Well, he answered my question. I was just confirming that there were other areas and that we were just limitedly talking about that today. Right on. Thank you.
That's by virtue of the question asked.
Okay. And so just for the sake of beyond the question, I mean, beyond the kind of the report today, just for my own new understandings, I don't particularly understand the framework of responsibility with respect to the affirmative action plan, who reports to who, who's responsible for what. I would love to kind of have a better understanding of that, if that's a fair question to ask today.
Through the chair, could you refine that for me a little bit? I mean,
The last slide that we have on the screen says Office of Equal Opportunity. Who oversees that? Who reports to who? We've heard from the HR director. We've heard from Ron, but what is the organizational framework for the municipality for the responsibility and the reporting to who for the affirmative action plans in general, let alone in this area?
right. The planning and the follow-up has always, to the best of my knowledge, been with the Human Resource Department, but we work in coordination with Equal Opportunity, particularly to improve our outreach, which I think has been happening. I think I'm really excited that we have that feature where we have the Office of Equal Employment Opportunity to help us with outreach. But the whole statistical effort, the data collection, and then the communicating to the assembly, to the executive branch, to the operating departments about any matters of concern, any of the placement goals and those kinds of things has been with HR as far as I know. Now, Ron can go into some of the history. I'm not quite sure
So just to
how that worked.
just to follow up on
Yeah.
it, that would again it seems to make sense that that's true with the limited scope of the reporting with respect to HR and hiring and equal opportunity in hiring, but that doesn't necessarily seem to make sense with respect to the other categories, and so I just don't know where that lives and how that
Yeah.
we should be tracking that.
So, and I agree. I think that again verges into other departments and other parts of the org chart that we should look at, which we need to prepare people for. And so I am very happy that we can talk about those things. We'll schedule it, and you and I should just frame out how we want it to be, and we'll get all the parties or advance notice and then an opportunity to come and have that talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, because this one is specific to the employment opportunity conversation that was in the report that was submitted to us. So that's why it's so narrow. So I have myself in the queue if I don't have anyone else. Two things. I think maybe Ms. Alatil asked the question and got the answer. I want to ask it again. It might be a slightly different way to ask it. Is there any way to kind of get a historic perspective on our fidelity to our affirmative action or equal opportunity plan, like looking back some years? I mean, this is aspirational. It's great. I like it all. And are we doing it? And not only are we doing it now, because I'm assuming we're doing it now, you're here to present it, but have we been doing it? And for how long have we been effectively doing it, right? And so that's a question that is very interesting to me.
Through the chair. As near as we can tell, there was a hiatus in preparing the plan. Ron was instrumental in restoring our planning and the follow-up. So probably 2020, 2019, Ron was very instrumental in making sure that we were collecting the data, making sure we had a few spots where the data wasn't being recorded. So he repaired those things. So I don't know what happened prior to that time. Yeah, I can't really speak to that, but I think the other piece of it is, though, the second half of your question, we are to have an effective plan. We need to record the activities that we do, whether it's outreach and Ron, for next time to this slide, I think we need to also add something about the retention activities, by the way. So as we, for example, if we had to do an analysis of a retention issue, and seeing an impact there, then we need to say, hey, that's part of our plan activity. Actually, the activity that Member Zolotel mentioned at APD, we need to get that into the plan because that's a positive thing that the organization is doing. And if we have other agencies that are doing things on their own that we're not entirely aware of, we need to collect that activity and make sure you all and the rest of the executive branch is aware of it. So, yeah, speaking of the past, I don't know, but I think Ron's done a great job of getting us back right with the world. So I'm very thankful for that.
Right. And that perspective is important. And, you know, we also have these performance reports that we get quarterly that we've had conversations about some of the older members about reviewing the purpose and function of some of these reports, because we get a link to a website that has like all of this data on the performance of all the departments. And it's impossible to figure out how to really get into it. And it really begs the question, is it being done right? Is it worth our time to review it? Which is kind of closer to what Mr. Martinez is talking about. I think the broader questions of these issues. And so we'll come back to that later. And before we close, I'll just say one thing. Last night, we had a meeting in this room with the native village of Eklutna, and the vice president of the tribe asked a question about the opportunity for training to our employees about the history and the position of the tribe in our community. She suggested that we need training. There was some heated conversation about how there's code required in the training. And then there was a response that Mr. Mavai is working on that training. And so I want to say thank you, because it's very, very important that we have that training developed and communicate to our workforce and the community at large, that culture, that community, that government, and those people that exist within our bounds in their special place. And so I want to thank you for getting onto that work, Mr. Mavai. So, Mr. Martinez, to close us out.
Thank you. They may not be answerable today, but these are things that I wonder about. Who establishes, or how do we establish values or the goals for said affirmative action plans? Are we just measuring actions and movements, but do we actually set goals or values? And do we do affirmative action plans for only 1 year overlaid upon a goal of like the next 3 years? This is what we hope our 1 year affirmative action plans across 3 years produces a result longitudinally. Do we think that way as well, or not yet?
So when we develop a plan, the goals are intended for the upcoming year, because the goals are set at the beginning of the year, and then we monitor those goals throughout the year. But then, you know, when the new plan year comes up, we actually recalculate everything, and then we can see once again whether we've made progress or maybe we've extinguished the goal, which happens. So it's actually an ongoing process. As to the goals themselves, for placement, we use, just very quickly, the data that's provided by the U.S. Census Bureau. It's called the EEO tabulation, and it tabulates the availability based upon gender, race, ethnicity by occupation within every census area in the United States. So I grabbed that data to give us what we should be expecting to see in our organization. And then we compare what we actually have to that, and that's how we come up with the goals.
Thank you.
Right. And I'm sorry, just to finish that off, the EEO tabulation, they use data from the decennial censuses as well as the American Community Survey, where they sample populations in between the 10-year census. And then they got a lot more statisticians than we got here. And they pile all that together and they publish that data.
Thanks. And I was a little distracted because I'm getting ready for the next work session. In that response, did you say there was a point in time where the assembly engages in the goal setting process?
Through the chair, Ron will present the new plan at the beginning of the year. The goals, placement goals, are generated by the statistical process. And simply wherever we have a supply of workers as determined by the census and the American Community Survey that tells us there's availability and we're not meeting that, that generates the goal automatically and says, hey, in, you know,
Okay,
in
so
the
let
fire
me
department.
rephrase the
go ahead.
question then
Go ahead.
slightly. We get a goal and then there are targets or activities or methods that are used to achieve the goal. Is there a point in time when the assembly is brought into that conversation so that we are part of the solution building? Or is it just kind of an administrative function in your opinion?
Through the chair, I think what happens is by us updating with you regularly, we should get some input that way. As far as I know, Ron, we have not built in a specific time to say, hey, here's the draft plan. Do you guys want to add, change, delete?
Okay,
Is
yeah,
that-
because what we've done in the past,
Okay.
created the chief equity position. We've additional funds for recruitment in certain areas, training opportunities, and it would be great if those would be coordinated and part of an approach that is strategic as opposed to reactive. And so it's a thought for the future, but we can talk about that more in the more thorough briefing. And I'm sorry we've gone over. We have to adjourn. We're going to take a 5-minute break instead of a 10-minute break before we start our next work session. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.